Hey, this is Liam, and this is my week 2 video, interacting with cisgender men. When I first thought about this topic, I thought it was a little strange because I wondered how I would feel about the same topic saying interactions with trans men, and I would probably think that it was based on assumptions and stereotypes and not really be thrilled with it. But putting all assumptions and stereotypes aside about men, because they do all interact with people, they do all enact their gender differently. They feel differently about their bodies. They feel differently about what it means to be a man, and I wouldn't want to lump anyone into a group based on anything besides their own experience and their own want to be in a group. So, and from the men I know who are cisgender men, and from interacting with general men in society who I'm assuming are cisgender, I do have some issues with social anxiety. Due to my Asperger's, I tend to respond differently in social situations and maybe not necessarily get as much joy out of simple chit-chat or small talk as people would have it. I'm much more into like in-depth conversations and really getting to know someone and trying to understand their experience and their way of thinking about life and how they live it. And I am very picky about the kind of people I like. I have pretty high standards as to how people behave and treat others. It really comes down to whether or not you are always trying to better yourself and to grow. And I find that a lot of people aren't, because they either don't want to or don't have any reason to try to do it, or have never really thought about really analyzing what they're doing with their experience and how they treat people in their life. But I do interact with plenty of people, and I do interact with quite a few cisgender men. I work with someone who's about my age, and my two somewhat bosses are both older cisgender men. And recently this week I've been on the job site with probably at least a dozen construction working, I'm assuming, cisgender men. And when I was living female-bodied, I don't like to say as a woman because I was never comfortable with that label, but when I was living and presenting female, I did often feel very insecure around men, and I think that's true of a lot of young men, or of men who may not fit the stereotype, and I've realized through my transition that it's really about my confidence, and if I'm comfortable and confident in the situation, then people are going to take that as the truth, and as me having reason to be confident, and they'll treat you in accordance to that, at least from what I've seen so far through my transition. I do still get nervous sometimes and struggle, but I don't necessarily relate it to interacting with cis men only, but to most people in general. I have found that the more I interact with cis men and the more I get to know them, the more it breaks down a lot of the stereotypes and assumptions that people have about how men behave and how they think about themselves and how they think about their masculinity and their gender role. And I don't think a majority of men are comfortable with the typical, the stereotypical fantastic male whatever, the god that is supposedly man. They don't want to strive necessarily for that, and they don't necessarily want the roles that are always placed on them. They want to be able to enact it in their own way, which is basically what trans people do, and ask to be respected for. But when it comes to interacting with anyone, I do have a general rule that I follow, which is that I'm only responsible for my own perceptions and intentions. And what it boils down to is that in so many situations it's easy to miscommunicate or misunderstand someone because you're making assumptions or having expectations about what you think they mean. And you can't do that. You can't turn your perceptions into their intent. You have to try to clarify if you're not sure, or to leave it a little open-ended. You have to remember that everything you do when interacting with someone is filtered through your own perceptions. And I think it's really important to be conscious of how your perceptions are coloring other people's intents. And then when you are interacting back with people, it's important to try and be sure that your intent is being sent across. Not that you're, being vague. Get your own intentions across. And to be conscious of how you may be perceiving other people's intentions, whether or not that's what they're intending. Miscommunication can be a lot of... Miscommunication can cause a lot of problems in any relationship or interaction, and I think it's really interesting how little people spend time working on how they interact with people, or thinking about how they could better get their point, how they could better explain themselves, or better their communications with others. And I think I'm starting to ramble, so maybe we'll call that my video. And yeah, that's that.